you the second question about PLG, product-led growth. Do you think it's going to kill off the sales rep and the account executive role?
No, absolutely not. And I think PLG has gotten a lot more hype recently, but it's existed for over a decade. You look at SaaS companies that have had a freemium offering and gone public and are enduringly profitable companies. They've existed for ages. So I don't think it's putting the AE or BDR role at risk at all. I think if anything, it's like having worked in sales at a PLG company, it's really hard to go back to a non-PLG motion.
Hey, Stephen, great to connect. Be excited to hear about what's it like. You're leading out sales and success at Calixa, which is a product-led growth platform. And so I thought there's probably no one better than you to talk about what's going on with product-led growth, PLG.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. So the way we always kick it off is I'm actually going to share my screen for just a minute and read, your LinkedIn resume from, bottom to top. And then I saw something about you studied abroad in Shanghai, and I'm going to start there. But just for everyone to get a sense of your background, moved web and started out in sales ops and were a sales engineer for 2 years. Then you moved to MixPanel and you were heading up sales engineering and leading a team there. And then you were at Sift for almost 4 years. And so a lot of the sales engineering background. And then, of course, in the past year and a half, you've been at Calixa. So we want to talk all about that. But did I miss anything, or is the role in there?
No, I think you covered it. The study abroad thing was, I was kind of in the traditional econ and math route at UCLA and was applying for a bunch of finance internships. And one that I really wanted didn't quite pan out. So ended up kind of doing a last minute pivot and decided to study abroad in Shanghai for a bit. Great experience. I definitely think more valuable than an internship would have been. It was kind of through the econ department, so focused on international trade, but really just opened my eyes to a completely different culture.
So I want to ask you about that, but I saw that a couple of the roles, they were in the Bay Area. Where did you go to high school? Are you a Bay Area native? Where are you from?
Yeah, no, I grew up in Central California. So a small town called Visalia between Fresno and Bakersfield. So if you've ever driven, sometimes people are driving north from LA to SF and they miss the turnoff for the 5. They end up on the 99 and you go through a bunch of towns. So Visalia was one of those towns. So that's where I grew up. Graduated from high school and made my way down to Southern California to UCLA after that.
And after graduating, when you went to Shanghai, what was the teaching program, or what were you doing day in, day out?
Yeah, so it was through the econ department, and it was kind of half international trade, and then partially business Chinese, and learned a ton of Chinese. No, I'm just kidding. I remember close to nothing from that, unfortunately. It was 6 weeks, so you can really only retain so much of a new language in that amount of time. But it was cool. They organized tours and took us through manufacturing facilities. We went to a steel facility, went to the Shanghai General Motors plant, and really got to kind of see the scale and sophistication of their manufacturing efforts, which was pretty awesome and pretty eye-opening.
Sounds like a great experience. Did you get to travel around, or did you do any stops in other cities afterwards?
Yeah, we did. It was mostly in Shanghai. We did a week in Beijing, so got to explore a lot of the historical and cultural monuments and stuff there. And then we went to a few other smaller cities around Shanghai, but the majority of the time was in the city.
Oh, what a good experience. Yeah, I after college, I did like a year and a half where I lived in Madrid, Spain, and I taught high school English, and it was still like probably the best experience. Like what a great role, and like I got to travel all over Europe, and um, yeah, I always recommend it. Do you find like when you're interviewing people for different roles, do you ask about have they traveled or they have an abroad experience? Like I think it adds a lot, but I'm curious, like, how do you ask for that?
Yeah, I think so. I've never explicitly asked about it or used it as like a screening method, but I will say a lot of the folks I've worked with, especially like on the SE teams that I've been a part of, a lot of the really successful people do bring that, those worldviews that incorporate like what they've learned from different cultures, and a lot of the SEs and sales reps that I've worked with have done a fair amount of traveling. I think that in this global economy, like you're at such an advantage, being exposed to, not just what we experience in the States day in and day out, but, how people are doing business around the world.
Let's dive into, the early days. Like, how did you jump into Move Web? Is that really your first, business role, or did you have one before that?
Yeah, so that was my first, real job after college. So I mentioned I had like applied for finance internships and stuff. Also considered going the consulting route, and had applied to and just read, dozens and dozens of job recs, and they all kind of start to sound the same after a while, right? You're everyone is looking for. Um, one of the thousands of people that are graduating from a public university. And so I actually stumbled upon this super weird role that I had never heard of at the time. It was like a sales operations engineer at MoveWeb. And I'd always been like fascinated with tech, but didn't grow up in the Bay Area. So I wasn't as exposed to it. Didn't have, family that, worked for any of the big tech companies at the time. Um, but I just kind of applied for this job on a whim, and instantly connected with the hiring manager. I was actually still finishing up my last quarter at UCLA at the time, and they were looking for someone to start full time immediately. But I kind of talked my way into like, let's do a part time 20 hours a week thing remote. So I mean at the time like remote work was pretty unheard of, but managed to start part time, and then as soon as I graduated, I moved up there, and
Got it.
yeah, that was kind of how it all kicked off, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, you've been building up into these different roles. So then you had a mixed panel. What was that like being a sales engineer, and then when you started leading a team of sales engineers?
Yeah, so MixPanel was, I'd say, my first experience with like a true PLG motion. I came on as we were kind of building out our enterprise motion, and uh, through that experience, really learned about this new way that companies were going to market, where it's like, hey, you give away like your product at the low end of the market and expect users to start to get value, and then you're ultimately going to make money as those accounts grow and as more people join, and as in MixPanel's case, as the products and those companies end up sending more data to us. So it was a great first experience into the world of PLG, and like, I mean, not to get ahead of ourselves here, but that like seeing the challenges that we faced as a sales org there was one of the things that ultimately kind of led me to be intrigued in the problem that Calixa is solving for. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah,
No, so when you're leading a team of sales engineers, what's kind of a day in the life? How do you manage sales engineers?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, leading SEs is great. Like I love that the role is so, it's so cross functional. It's so multifaceted. So, I mean, at the end of the day, your job is to make sure that the the SEs are able to successfully help their AEs close business. Like that's the whole role in a nutshell. And I think SEs kind of typically either come from an engineering background, so like a big E in the SE, or they come from a sales or customer facing background, and they have a bit more of the soft skills going in, and are looking to kind of develop on their technical skills. But like at Sift, we promoted people from BDRs, from support into the SE org, and then we also had people kind of graduate from the SE org into product, or move up segments to work bigger deals. So I think like one of the fun things, or the exciting things about that role is the folks on the team typically are very interested in learning and development, and kind of picking a path, and honing their skills, and really developing in like one of those paths that I mentioned.
Ask you then, when you got to Calixa, what do you remember about kind of how did you first hear about that company? How did it go in the interview process?
So I had worked with both Thomas and Fred when I was at Sift. So Fred was Sift's co-founder, and Thomas was leading product. And I had worked pretty closely with Thomas on quite a few of our bigger opportunities, selling to enterprise customers. And like one of the things that immediately stood out was like his focus on solving customer problems. There's like quite a few different ways of running a product org, and I think one of Thomas's strengths is like hyper focus on what the customer actually needs. And so when him and Fred left Sift, and they kind of kept me in the loop that they were working on a startup. When it got time for them to start taking it to market, they were looking for someone to kind of help get some early customers on board, get a lot of product feedback, and ultimately like build out the early go-to-market motion. I was super pumped because it was like I knew that they were a team that was going to succeed, like strong track record of success, but also it was in a space that I was passionate about. Like every company that I had been at had seen this challenge where sales reps they need data to figure out which of their leads are going to convert and who's most engaged with the product, but none of the tools that they had access to really solve that problem. So I knew that since this problem had existed for over a decade with SaaS businesses, it felt like we were onto something. And this was even like before PLG was like the norm, or like the hype that everyone was talking about. So yeah, I was just really like attracted to the problem and the mission that the team was looking to solve for.
But you knew the founders from the previous time at Sift, and
exactly.
you trusted they were going to have success. So I think that's key for people who are thinking about joining a company that's really in its infancy, like pre-seed or Series A. And if it's under 10 employees or under 20 employees, you have to get a good feeling about the founders, because there's a lot of trust there that like they're going to keep the lights on, and they're going to figure it out, and they're going to keep scaling. So
yeah, absolutely. And like you join, and the product is going to change, the rest of the team is going to change, like maybe who you're selling into is even going to change. But like,
what's your best definition of product-led growth, PLG?
yeah, look, I mean, everyone has their own spin or like different minutia that I think can differentiate like a standard PLG company from the wildly successful ones. Like people talk about viral growth loops and whatnot, but I think at the end of the day, the simplest way of putting it is like you're giving the user of the product more control in how they use and the software. And so typically that manifests itself as like either a freemium offering or a free trial. And those companies that have a freemium or free trial offering typically are typically the ones that are kind of considered PLG.
Let me ask you the second question about PLG, product-led growth. do you think it's going to kill off the sales rep and the account executive role?
No, absolutely not. And I think PLG has gotten a lot more hype recently, but it's existed for, over a decade. Like you look at SaaS companies that have had a freemium offering and gone public and are enduringly profitable companies. They've existed for ages. So I don't think it's putting the AE or BDR role at risk at all. I think if anything, it's like having worked in sales at a PLG company, like it's really hard to go back to a non-PLG motion. Like if anything, it's equipping the sales rep with so much more that can help them be effective and help them add value to the customer. You think about like if you are selling a product if you're selling a software product that doesn't allow end users to try the product before they buy it, you're going through extensive discovery and you're doing your best to kind of try to put together this picture of how the customer is going to use the product and get value and use that to, ultimately move them closer to the finish line. With PLG, like your focus is purely on like making sure if the end users are already using the product, like quantifying the value that they're getting and then using that to sell the decision makers upstream. So yeah, I think like having the additional intent data of how people are using the product just changes the role of the AE, but it's not putting it at risk at all.
No, that's probably reassuring for a lot of people to hear, and I think it's interesting that that's your perspective. And I tend to agree that there's so many teams where having a sales assist and having a sales led, and then there's so many platform softwares where having a real sales team, it seems like it's going to continue to be really beneficial.
Yeah, and I think it's having a great sales team, but I think it's also making sure that you've kind of you've designed the business and the go-to-market motions around where salespeople are going to be adding value and generating revenue that wouldn't be captured otherwise. Like we've, given the state of the market, you talk to companies and everyone's thinking about how they can do more with less, cut costs, and I think a big part of that is like really looking at your funnel and figuring out like how do we ensure that reps are productive, hitting quota, but also that we're not paying people to focus on small deals that would have converted otherwise, right? So it's unfortunate that that's led to a lot of layoffs, but I think it's changing the way that businesses think of like coverage on opportunities and what segments of their pipeline really require sales.
That's interesting, but I feel like if they get it wrong, they're going to find that in the first half of 2023, a lot of their velocity and SMB and smaller deal sizes, if they're not converting with the no touch, like they're going to have a couple of quarters of really low predictability or low achievement. So
yeah, I think it's something that every company like is already focusing on, but needs to stay like hyper focused on.
Appreciate your take with PLG. Let's jump over to the next segment, which is the investor corner. Segment where we just talked about investing and a little bit of wealth, a little bit of side hobbies. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So maybe just to start off with, what's been your investing strategy? How did you get into investing to start off with?
Yeah, honestly, like I take a pretty boring approach for the majority of the money that I've invested. It's S&P index funds, just steady Eddie returns. I would say the slightly riskier stuff is like a mix of exercising options for the startups that I've worked at. Going through my resume, like you'll notice that none of those companies have either IPO'd or been acquired while I've been there. And I think that one of the pros and the cons of working at startups is obviously you have a lot more upside potential, but timing oftentimes dictates like how like good of a return on your investment you're going to get. And it's awesome for employees that are at a company during IPO or during acquisition, and don't have to think about if they want to exercise options. But for a lot of employees, it's also like that can be a pretty big investment decision to make, especially after you've left a company.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing on the stock market. We've heard from a lot of different folks on this show where they'll talk about they work with a local advisor or someone that they trust. Or a lot of folks have said, well, they go with the Warren Buffett methodology that's just like put it into a low fee index fund and track the S&P 500. I tend to go with what you're saying also. Like that's just been my kind of set it and forget it and just do a monthly a monthly investment. My setup has always been like the Vanguard, like VTI or VOO. Like there's a couple of those ETFs and index funds that really just keeps it very simple. Have you added anything that's more nuanced or more complex, or are you at that level? That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I try to always reserve some for like, let's play around a bit, and this might work out, this might not. So luckily, like invested in Tesla and watched that climb during the pandemic. Didn't sell near the top, sold prematurely, but like still was able to benefit from that a bit. Was in Twitter before the acquisition, so that was cool. But yeah, I mean, those are like, I would consider. I think of it as like you never want to invest more than like a couple percent of your net worth. Say you invest like 1% in something that's super risky, you lose it all. You still got 99% of your net worth. It 100x's, cool. Like you made a pretty penny. So think about that kind of stuff with any individual stocks, especially like stuff that's a bit more speculative or I guess hype driven. But also like cryptocurrency. And
did you get into the crypto stuff early or pretty recently, or how much exposure did you have to the whole FTX and all the
managed to dodge the FTX bullet? Like I guess early is always relative. So I wasn't buying pizzas with single Bitcoin back in the day, but threw like a few $100 in because like my friends were doing the same, and like watched that grow a bit. But yeah, definitely didn't have any like meaningful percentage of my investments in crypto or anything.
Got it.
Yeah, how about you?
It never clicked or made sense to me. I remember back when I first joined at PandaDoc, there was a lot of talk about the smart blockchain and smart contracts and some of the capabilities that maybe would be like underpinning this technology, but I just never really followed it. And I've just kind of stuck with the simply, dollar cost average, just throw it into the VTI and just kind of set it and forget it. I just, do the right thing and invest.
If you're not trying to retire in the next 2 years, like I think it's a strategy that's tough to argue with.
Tool or a new app, something that you've been playing with that's either personal or like a business tool, anything that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, this ChatGPT, like everyone's talking about it on Twitter and whatnot, but it's crazy. Like both from a pure entertainment perspective, like some of the stuff you can throw, like I joking around at a few of my college buddies, like are planning bachelor parties, and I asked it to like plan a bachelor party for them, and like it gave a breakdown of the day by day agenda. But like actual practical applications at work as well, like it nails. I was, you know, I had like a one customer request where they needed us to write a script to upload some data, and I basically described exactly what they needed to ChatGPT, and it outputted pretty much the exact code that was required to run this script. Like it's pretty mind blowing to see what it's capable of and how quickly it produces results.
That's crazy. So the code that you had kind of that it spat out, was it to integrate with like another system, or was it like a webhook script, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was like we needed a Python script, and so like I'm not doing a ton of SE work today, but I can I can like work my way around a Python script if I need to. And I was like, well, I could either spend 20 minutes, Googling on Stack Overflow and trying to figure out like all the right syntax, or I could just write the specific requests to this bot, and it output a Python script that would basically take data from a file and then send it to an API in the right format, and transform it and do everything that I needed it to do, with very minimal modification required.
That's so interesting. On the All In podcast, they talked months and months ago about this idea that maybe the AI would get us to this place where like a lot of our, you know, sales and solution engineers and customer success, like a lot of our work would be more about like orating or, talking out like, what are we trying to get done in the day, and kind of just reading out like a few different commands or projects. And by speaking it, the OpenAI may help you like complete a bunch of this or create a workflow diagram or spit out the script. So that's the first time I've heard of it. Actually, it saved you 20 minutes and you just got the perfect code that you could drop to your client and say, here's what you guys need to do to get the integration working or to
Yeah.
get XYZ done. Like that's huge. And then have you seen it do things like writing a poem or making up a song, or there's some weird like humanistic, the aspects that when I see it, I'm just like, how did it know to write something in the style of Charles Dickens, or they write something like Hemingway, different than just being a straight search engine?
I feel like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible. Yeah, like Mark Andreessen posts, he's like having it write screenplays between like tech journalists and and like founders and stuff. That stuff is pretty spot on. Yeah, it's crazy. I think there's a ton of potential, and I think that there's going to be a lot of companies that are built kind of using these technologies. I think a lot of them will probably get a fair amount of hype and some early traction, and I think some will actually be like game changers in the industry. So it'll be really really fascinating to see which ones are successful.
It's so interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to see in January, like what are some of the most interesting ideas where people start sharing how they're using it. Because I liked, I read that also. I read someone did like ask the OpenAI Chat GPT to write a screenplay like in the style of Tarantino, and that was the pretext of what the script came
Yeah.
out. So there's a lot of fun things to do. The bachelor party idea is genius, and I hope some people come up with great ideas for like either I'm thinking like how to Valentine's Day gifts, like planning your vacation. Like there might be a lot of ideas that people come up with. Do you think sales reps and solutions engineers, like, have we just been spending so much time like in between meetings on our calendar or writing follow-up emails? And
Oh, totally. I mean, it's a huge opportunity, right? There's already so many companies that are focused purely on the writing cold emails and like the outbound flow.
what have you seen from some of your teams? Like, what's been the best way to go outbound or to get some new deals?
You kind of have to do a little of everything. I mean, there's no one silver bullet. Like the days of just like sending more emails than your competitors and like making the messaging better and expecting your results to be better. Like I think those days are over. So um, especially for Calixa, we're working with sales teams. Like you have to meet your audience where they already are, which a lot of the times is LinkedIn. So community has been pretty effective. But yeah, I mean, it's like community ABM, cold emails. You got to do it all and just continuously tweak and modify your strategy based on what's working and what's not working.
When it's a competitive bake-off or it's a competitive deal, is there a way you think about it? I mean, I've worked with all sorts of sales leaders, and I've worked at some pretty kick-ass, software companies that had a lot of competition, and we've taken it a couple different ways. So how do you view competitive deals, and how do you like to see them run?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's like kind of two stages or two types. One is like uh, the pre POC. So like we're trying to demonstrate enough value to where this company would choose us to participate in a bake off. And I think a lot of that is like establishing credibility in the space. Proving that you have a track record of success with companies that are similar. And it gets interesting once you get to the POC stage. Everyone's trying to like adopt these PLG, PLS processes and layer tech into that process to help them automate or improve efficiency. So no one has like the formula dialed in. It's not like Salesforce where you can just go deploy like contractors that will set up Salesforce based on best practices that are going to work for you. So what we've found to be really successful is be like as hands-on as humanly possible. So understand feedback from the end users, map that to what the decision makers care about. Constantly be suggesting ideas. Like, you can't just like wait for the prospect to ask, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? It's like you have to be seen as the expert and always be kind of pushing them or suggesting new best practices. So yeah, those are some of the things. I mean, just basically smother the customers with as much support and love as you can.
If you could just share, you're talking to a founder or to a new team, for some team that has not set up a really hyper successful product-led growth PLG system, what are just one or two things, like where should a company start or on the path to PLG?
Yeah, great question. So I think start small, pick 2 or 3 key metrics that you want to track and want to equip your go-to-market org with, and think about 1 to 2 ways that you would use that data to either improve conversion, drive deal velocity, uncover more potential opportunities in your sign-up base, and test those out, learn from the results, and iterate.
What's one common metric that you're seeing as a really good one to anchor on?
For like the most basic use case is any SaaS business that is seat-based, new users added in the last week. Find opportunities where you have accounts that are adding a ton of users. We're seeing for more sophisticated companies, paywalls triggered. So anyone that has like a freemium model where some functionality is gated, if people hit those paywalls, definitely use that to equip the reps and highlight opportunities for upsell or moving to the next plan.
Hope you enjoyed New Technique. We've got a lot more episodes coming out in the near term. You can follow and subscribe on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on YouTube. Hope you're liking it, and stay tuned for a lot more coming soon.